So welcome to the next session, which is around consulting process. You now have your real life project, and now it's like, what process are we going to use to actually take the client through to actually shape the problem and solution to that problem, which really is your job. So let's go through the consulting process on this next slide. So really, where do you start? The first thing you need to do is actually shape the problem you're trying to solve, and more importantly is which question or what question are you really trying to answer for this client. So asking the right question and answering that question is the key element, the first step in the consulting process. Then once you've identified the problem, the next step is to disaggregate that problem down into the underlying issues that are driving that particular problem facing the client. And even then you may, if you feel confident enough, is start building a hypothesis around solving that problem. The next step really in the process is you've got a lot of the issues on the table now. Now it's so important that you actually figure out which issues you really need to address and eliminate the ones that are not that important or not related, more importantly, to the problem, and move those out because they will waste your time in undertaking the consulting process. Once you've then got your issues identified and eliminate those ones you don't need to focus on, you're ready now to start scoping out the practice, scoping out the project, which we will talk to more of you about in a minute. So once you've scoped that out, it's really looking at what are the constraints and making sure you stick to that scope, because the last thing you want to do, and you'll hear a lot from us about this, is you don't want to get scope creep, because you won't have the time or potentially the budget to address that additional scope that you may be faced. So controlling your scope in the consulting process is a very important step. So now once you've got your scope clear, we can actually start building your work program. I wouldn't like to see any of you starting to build a work program before you've identified your problem, understood the issues, eliminated those issues, and delivered your scope to the client. Because now you're ready to actually build out your work plan of who's going to do what by when. So clearly the next step from there is what, as part of your work plan, is you'll be going to do a whole lot of analysis, research, gathering data, and undertaking that work to actually analyse what's causing those particular issues through different primary, secondary research. Once you've got all the research data in and the facts, you can then synthesise that and start understanding what does that mean, and start pushing towards solving that problem, coming up with a recommendation, coming up with a recommended solution. You really need to start pushing towards that recommendation at this stage in the process. And then finally, once you've got your recommendation, you can have the greatest recommendation possible, but it's how well you communicate that and persuade executives and your client at any level, persuading them to your way of thinking, to how you might solve this. So your ability to communicate and present is a very critical component of the overall consulting process. So we've taken you through that quick 8-step process, and we'll talk to you a bit more soon about what are the skills you're going to need to actually deliver on that process.